Hello. Um, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Tom Farley. I am a senior lecturer and academic developer with the N-TUTOR Curriculum Framework team, which is a strand of the overall MTU N-TUTOR project team. This event, incorporating thematic change in the curriculum, is being organised as part of the MTU's contribution to N-TUTOR Week. And I suppose before we just kick off formally, can I just attend to some brief housekeeping for our in-room participants in the unlikely event of an emergency. Please exit the door you came in, turn to your left, follow the emergency signs, down the stairs and out the building. Okay, so given the time frame and there's a lot of moving parts here, I want to quickly give you a brief outline of the event. We'll have a welcome address here by the MTU President, Professor Maggie Cusack, and I will be joined then by the institutional lead, Dr. Louise Nagel, for a brief address. I will then invite our keynote speaker, Dr. Audrey Doyle, to speak for approximately 25 minutes. And following the keynote, I will highlight some of the responses to our online questions to kickstart our panel discussion, where I'll be joined by myself, Dr. Doyle, and my two N-TUTOR Curriculum Framework colleagues, Dr. Neve Power, Dr. Violetta Moreri, with the intention of finishing just before 2 p.m. We're very mindful that people have to get back to work. The event is designed to be a hybrid, and therefore we wish to involve both sets of members of the audience, both here and in the room online. And we aim to have this as an interactive event. Therefore, to enable participation and feedback, we're using the Slido platform. Using Slido, we will pose a series of questions during the event, and of course you're free to just pose questions, which we will take then as well. So regardless of whether you're in the room or online, simply grab your smartphone or laptop, open your web browser and go to slido.com. And if you ask for a password there, it'll be hashtag, well the hashtag is already there, so it's MTU24. It doesn't matter if it's upper or lowercase. And we'll also have a roving mic, but as I said, what I'd say before you actually speak, just wait till the mic is handed to you. So just a formal welcome. I would like to begin by welcoming and thanking our MTU President, Professor Maggie Cusack, here for being able to attend. I know she's always very busy, and to attend, and members of the MTU N-TUTOR Thematic sponsor team. And we have Dr. Brendan O'Donnell, the Vice President, Academic Affairs and Registrar, and Dr. Stephen Cassidy, sorry, I'm very nervous, and Dr. Sulawan, the head of the TEL department. In the room, I'm also joined by my N-TUTOR colleagues, Dr. Louise Nagel, the MTU institutional lead, Dr. Angela Wright, Dr. Larkin Cunningham, Ms. Aoife Gallagher, Ms. Patrina Comerford, Dr. Catherine Frehel, Mr. Colin O'Brien, Mr. Eric Oakley, it's all joined part, and as I said, I'd also like to thank Dr. Audrey Doyle, who will be our keynote speaker. And given that student engagement is a central element of N-TUTOR, I'm delighted to welcome some of our MTU student champions. I do really want to give a particular shout out and highlight one notable development of the new expectation that people have post-COVID is the ability to offer hybrid events and incorporate online and in-person participation. And doing this well requires a lot of work, and I can't emphasise that too much. To that end, I want to acknowledge the role that the MTU Department of Technology Enhanced Learning here in Cork has had in supporting the event. Particularly want to thank the TEL staff, Shane Crown and Brendan Flaherty, Jeremiah Spillan, all the team, and the head of the TEL department, Dr. Garoda Sulawan, who leads out also on another part of the N-TUTOR project nationally. You may or may not be aware as well, the big element of the N-TUTOR Week is the N-TUTOR on Track, where I'll be accompanied by students from different partners every day as we travel from city to city visiting the respective N-TUTOR institutions. In addition to our own N-TUTOR MTU student champions, I'm very pleased to welcome two guest student champions from SETU Carlow, who arrived here last night and are part of the proceedings here today in MTU, Igor Melishenko and Fredo Eong. And without any further ado, I would now like to step up there and thank you very, very much. As I said, so it's really very, very welcome here. So can I just now formally invite Professor Cusack to open the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom, for that. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to join you here for this hybrid event as part of N-TUTOR Week. Just to say you're all very, very welcome to MTU to our Bishopstown campus, and also to extend a really warm welcome to everyone who's joining us online. As Tom said, it's a hybrid event. It does take a lot more effort and work but it's great that we can come together in that format. So welcome to everyone, whether you're here in the room or you are joining us online. As you know, this is just one of several events that are taking place as part of N-TUTOR Week, which is running throughout the week, and the events have all been publicised all the way up to and including Friday. It's part of the overall N-TUTOR project, which is a European Union and Next Generation EU funded project. You know that there are 7 partner institutions, including, of course, us and MTU. There's ATU, Dundalk IT, AIADT, CETU, TUS, and TU Dublin. So those are all the partners. And MTU is really proud to be part of the N-TUTOR project because, along with all of our partner institutions, we're genuinely committed to transforming learning and driving that digital transformation across the technological higher education sector. I think in simple terms, N-TUTOR is about you, our staff, and our students, and it's about giving you the opportunity to get involved in that higher education landscape. So in our own strategic plan, MTU's strategic plan, which is called Our Shared Vision, we set out our key themes, and they include learner education and experience, and include people and community. So in other words, students and staff are central and the main focus of the plan. And N-TUTOR, of course, has a number of core themes as well. Core themes around digital transformation, universal design for learning, education for sustainability, academic integrity, equality, diversity and inclusion, and employability. And I think these themes are really similar to MTU's strategic plan, and there's really clear resonance between the two. You'll notice that the 20 or so events that we're hosting across our Cork and our Kerry campuses this week all include aspects of these very themes. And we're also committed to playing our part in achieving N-TUTOR's overall project goal, which is to deliver best practice suite of initiatives for students and staff development, and to support these with enabling technologies in a sustainable way. So this lunchtime event is entitled Embedding Change in the Curriculum, and I'm really grateful to our curriculum development team for inviting me here and obviously for organising such an interesting event. So I'm delighted to welcome our keynote speaker, Dr. Audrey Doyle, who's Assistant Professor in the School of Policy and Practice in DCU. You're very welcome. Dr. Doyle is going to be leading the discussion on curriculum development and change. And that word change is really important. The higher education landscape is constantly changing. But with all of that change, the curriculum remains the cornerstone of our educational mission. And the theme of embedding change in the curriculum, I think, goes to the heart of that mission. It challenges us to rethink traditional approaches, to question educational norms, and to reimagine the possibilities for teaching and learning in the 21st century. I think really importantly, we also have to consider how we'll change ourselves. Because I think it calls on us to be agents of change and innovation, and really encourages us to be champions of progress in our respective fields and disciplines. So the journey towards embedding change in the curriculum won't be without its obstacles. It needs courage, resilience, and a real willingness to embrace uncertainty. It demands thoughtful planning, effective communication, and sustained collaboration across all levels of the educational ecosystem. And perhaps most importantly, it needs a shared commitment to the principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion that lie at the core of our university. So I know you'll all be excited to hear from Dr. Doyle on the challenges and opportunities that are ahead of us. And I hope that you all find N-Tutor Week 24 informative and inspirational. Once again, thank you all for coming to the event in person or online, and I would really encourage you to attend some of the other N-Tutor Week events over the coming days too. I want to just finish by saying thank you to everyone. Tom, you were very brave in attempting to name everyone individually. I'll say a thank you to everyone involved in organising the events and also providing the individual sessions. So thank you all. I hope you have a wonderful week.
I think that's a tip I'll have to learn for future references, Professor Cusack. Thank everybody rather than an individual name. Thank you very, very much. Today's event centres on one of the most fundamental aspects of education, the curriculum. And today we're considering how we can embed changes across the curriculum. N-Tutor's 6 core themes reflect many of the evolving priorities and opportunities and challenges which present the higher education sector now. And across those three streams of, as Professor Cusack mentioned, about engagement, staff capabilities and digital ecosystems. And here to set out in a little more detail about the N-Tutor project is MTU's institutional lead, Dr. Louise Nagel.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Professor Cusack, for opening the session today. So today's session, entitled Incorporating Thematic Change in the Curriculum, it forms part of N-Tutor Week. So this is a series of events which are going to be held across the technological university sector, across DKIT and IADT this week. And we're delighted to welcome Dr. Audrey Doyle here today as part of the MTU's sequence of thematic sessions. So Audrey's knowledge, I have no doubt, her knowledge and experience will inform MTU's work in developing the curriculum framework, which forms part of the N-Tutor work plan. At a national level, the N-Tutor Stream 2 working group developed overarching principles for a curriculum framework. And this was noted at MTU Academic Council last autumn. A community of practice has also been formed with members of all the Irish ITs informing this work. Locally, an MTU curriculum framework steering group has met and is progressing the development of an MTU curriculum framework. The group is progressing specific initiatives such as customizing self-evaluation tools and piloting projects on curriculum framework developments within specific academic departments. So I'd like to commend the work of this steering group, its sponsors, and the academic developers on the work completed to date on this framework. But I also want to acknowledge the M-Tutor team, particularly the team here in MTU, members of whom have worked tirelessly on the success of this week and on the various initiatives. So thank you all, and I'd like to hand you back to Tom.
Thank you very much, Louise. Listen, you've heard far too much of me talking this morning, so just very quickly then, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote, Dr. Audrey Doyle, who, as previously mentioned, is an assistant professor in the School of Policy and Practice in DCU's Institute of Education, where one of our principal interests in PhD research is in the area of curriculum design, so I think she's well placed to help stimulate the debate today. And just one final plug for slido.com, just go on MTU24. So can I please welcome Dr. Doyle.
Good afternoon, everybody here and online. It is absolutely a pleasure to be here today. My first slide shows a very complex road system, And I think really curriculum is a highly complex landscape. And so what we're going to have a look at today is perhaps how we're going to maybe get through some of the complexities of that particular N-TUTOR landscape that we're hoping to have. The N-TUTOR project is trying to create a transformable, I suppose, a sustainable pedagogical learning environment that will transform student experiences. So how can we do that, each of us, in our own particular discipline, in our own particular area? So I'm going to have a look at curriculum development and curriculum making over the next couple of minutes. So the first thing I want to have a look at, I suppose, is a quick run through, where are we going today? What am I going to do with you? So what I'm going to do is have a look at whistle-top tour through change, because curriculum change today is phenomenal. But also then to offer you 3 different flows that I pulled from the work of Deleuze and Guattari: semiotic flow, material flow, and social flow. And these 3 things I'm going to apply to the 3 most important elements of curriculum, which are the ideology, the actual framework, and pedagogy. So that's where we're going to go today. And I hope at the end of it you can go that the 3 flows I'm offering you, they have to work simultaneously as we work through any kind of curriculum reform. So here is our curriculum looking at change. I just threw up some pictures of the curriculum landscape that we sit in today. And we can see we have our refugee crisis, we've Dublin in flames recently, we've AI, we've Brexit, we have Gaza, we have lots of war, and we have climate change. And this is where our students are, I suppose, inhabiting the world they're inhabiting today. And we kind of, scholars are often saying to us, there's a lot of anxiety around, the world that we live in today. And instead of saying to us, let's be calm and carry on, they're actually saying to us at this point, panic. And that is really worrying, because what they're asking us to do now in all of higher education is to rethink, reshape, and reimagine the patterns of human life that we're, involved in. Not only our travel and our energy, consumption, city planning, but also education. And some of the panic that we're talking about comes from many of these elements. And we can see globalization, neoliberalism, the rise to the right, climate change, the rise of AI. And we're all dealing with that, particularly in relation to assessment at the moment, and trying to rethink and reimagine what that might look at, and making sure the integrity of our discipline continues within that. But this is just some of the story of the panic. And what we're saying now is, what is it that we can particularly do within this? Our job is not only for really, ensuring students' employability, but also how do they navigate the world of the 21st century and do so by staying well. And these are parts of the things that curriculum now must offer us. So the one thing we know about change is that change changes behavior. It changes practice. Think about COVID. Did you ever think you would remain within a 5-kilometre, and do all that we did in COVID? We would never have thought it. But also, it disrupts the way we think about the world. It disrupts our thinking, our worldview, and what it does is any kind of change asks us to relearn and transform. And when we're looking at this, we're saying to ourselves, well, what is it now from this N-TUTOR project that they're asking us to do? Are we going to, how are we going to disrupt our thinking about curriculum and reshape what it is we're offering our students? And we're offered some of those themes today in N-TUTOR as we move forward. So the one change that has come about over the last series of years, I suppose over the last decade, is that at higher education, each one of us has become a curriculum maker. In 1999, in the Bologna Declaration, learning outcomes came to us. And from learning outcomes, we were asked to choose knowledge, skills, understanding and values that the student would actually be able to demonstrate at the end of learning. And from that, we are being asked to look, to really think about our professional judgment. How do we interpret? How do we mediate? How do we translate and enact these particular learning outcomes for our students? And when we look at those learning outcomes, we're aware that it's not just our interpretation, but it has been interpreted right across the various strata. So at the supra level, we have the OECD, we have the World Bank, we have the EU, all in discussion about certain curricular conversations that they want us to know about. We also have our national policies. We have the higher education policies. We have our department policies, and then we have ourselves, our own modules. And when we look at all of this, we're kind of saying to ourselves, well, what's important here in my curriculum making? And we begin to see what Priestley is suggesting is that one of the most important things here is this unique social practices that go with curriculum making. And that's where maybe our whole week of N-TUTOR to this week is that social interaction that's going to help us move forward. What I'm going to suggest to you is that in our curriculum making and transformation, there are three very important things that we actually have to think about: semiotics, material, and social flow. And when you look at the semiotics, we're looking at language. What are the concepts? What is the language that actually N-TUTOR is offering here? And we talk about diversity, we talk about UDL, Universal Design for Learning. We talk about inclusion. We talk about, all the various quality education and so forth. But really, what do they mean? What exactly, and are you clear about what they mean? So what are the ideas behind them? Also, what about the materials you're going to use? So, okay, we're in a technological university, so materials are going to be very important. Technology is going to be really important. But what about the documents? What documents are underpinning everything that we have? What about the structures? I know, for example, in DCU, we started off and we had great theatres, lecture theatres, which have become now defunct because we're now using very, very different type of pedagogy. And, so sitting there, we want group work. We can't because everybody's sitting in rows and it's very difficult to deal with it. So your structures, your material flow is very important. Also your budget. What is your budget? Now, I heard lovely things about the research budget coming down to you. So the research budget looks very good, but what is your budget? And what are the kind of challenges a budget puts into a technological university? Huge, I would say. And then what about the social flows? Your social flows, who is connecting with who? We're talking about ecosystems, the digital ecosystems, the communication, and the collaborative practices that are going on within each of the universities, your higher education, and your departments. So each of these three things I am going to offer you, and I'm going to apply them to the curriculum to see basically how is it that they might help you kind of decipher where it is you might need to go now to bring in those very important themes into your curriculum. So every curriculum has to have three things: an ideology, a framework, and a pedagogy. And they all have to be cohesive. They have to all align together to actually make a really, really good curriculum. So let's have a look at that. We're going to first of all look at the ideology. And an ideology is all about who is the human we're talking about here, and what kind of knowledge are we talking about? When I talk about knowledge, I'm talking about that wide spread of knowledge, skills, understanding, and values. Is that okay with everybody? So what about the ideology? So let's look at the ideology we've had over the last 100 years. If you go back and we look at traditional curriculum studies, it used to be looked at like the plan, the track, the course to be covered. And it was seen as a noun, very much the noun. And on that track and so forth, it was the teacher or the lecturer who determined exactly what knowledge was to be actually brought forward. And when we look at that, we think about Ralph Tyler and how he kind of suggested to us, what you do first is you get your objectives, followed by your content, followed by your sequence, then followed by your assessment. But the problem with curriculum, ideology, as traditional ideology, is that it was very much about assessment. Everything geared itself to assessment. It became very narrow, insular, and very linear. And I suppose our Leaving Cert today in Ireland would be very much, that kind of linear instrumental process, where the backwash of focusing on assessment, backwashes onto how the teacher teaches and so forth. Then Stenhouse in the 70s suggested, what about the student? So rather than a noun, the curriculum being the noun, it is now the verb. It's not just about the track or the plan, but it's about how the student is actually experiencing the track, the running on the track, the verb. How are they actually experience the running in your curriculum? And so we have people like Pinar and Gromit suggesting we have forgotten the student, that it was so much focused on the teacher and the lecturer that really there was very little focus on the student. So they're suggesting a much more autobiographical understanding of curriculum, where it becomes about the student, and then we have that move to the student-centred approach. Now, when you look at N-TUTOR, we're going to see very much a student-centred approach, quite a reconceptualist approach in their theory. But at the same time, we also have a postmodern approach. So when you look at the postmodern or the post-reconceptualist, what is that about? And as we know, all the postmodern, the main thing will be to challenge everything that has been normative previously. And we are challenging in the themes of the N-TUTOR, what do we mean by diversity? What do we mean by inclusion? What is equity? And these are some of the themes that are coming up. But also in the postmodern, we want everybody to have a home within the world. So we want everybody of all religions, ethnicities, of all race, of all sexuality and gender, of all abilities, to find a home within the education world and the world that they live in. And when we look at that postmodern world, now what I suppose curriculum has become is not about the product, which was about their plan, the very traditional. It is not only about the process, which is about the verb, which is the reconceptualist, but it's about transformation. Very much about the transformation of the student. And we have Dahl suggesting that now it has to be about the richness of the curriculum, the recursivity of how we actually reflect on it, the relations in the curriculum between the teacher and the student, but also the rigor, that there has to be always alternatives, differences, possibilities. Now look at the N-TUTOR project. And maybe let's have a look at the semiotics, the language of the N-TUTOR project. Where does it now sit? And when we look at it, we see very much in the very center of it the word transformation. So we can see the lendings of the theory of the postmodern, but we also see, the student experience there, the reconceptualist idea coming across. We definitely see digital ecosystems. And ecosystems are very much about the actual, the networking, the connectivity in our world today. So all these things, and then depending on staff capability. So the agency of the staff to actually learn what it is that we're about. I suppose a challenge for us all is that within those three different types of curriculum theory, Ireland sits. So within our own university, we'll have some people in the traditional, we'll have some people as the reconceptualist, and we'll have some people moving into the postmodern. And it's a moving between those in a liminal space. And where do we sit, and where does N-TUTOR sit? And where are you comfortable sitting? And these are some of the semiotic decisions you're going to have to make as you move forward. So in thinking about language, what knowledge and skills are most of worth and why? And these are the decisions you're going to make now as you move forward. What is it of most worth? And answering those questions will give you direction to your change, because we're taking on these new themes what is most worth and relevant to the student of the 21st century. And allowing that then for the complexities of these things to appear. And then ensuring that you're avoiding I suppose, intended messages. Because sometimes that hidden curriculum comes out, very often, and we have to be careful. So really, what rationale are you choosing? So what ideology are you sitting in? What rationale, underpins your narrative that explains your semiotics and your language? What's the common language you're all using? And are you using the same language? We have to kind of really get on top of that. What are the concepts that are emerging in your university? And as we can see from the president herself, we're speaking similar language. The N-TUTOR project is speaking to the university strategy here, and that's brilliant. And then, are we clear about these proposed changes, and so forth? So as well as the semiotics and the language you have to get around in a curriculum, you have to look at the framework. And every framework then, they draw from the academic, the professional, the vocational, the practical and the experiential to give experiences to students. But let's have a look at the frameworks. As I said to you, learning outcomes is the actual foundation stone of all our frameworks at the moment. And it asks us for a student-centered approach. It really, really kind of asks us to, what do we know, what do we understand, and what are the students going to be able to do at the end of your particular module or program? And you're being asked to really, really think that through. But it's not just about you inputting anymore. It's also about student output. So it's that input-output, really, really, really important, that comes from the various frameworks. But, how you do that, you must have cognizance, I think, of the various material flow that's coming down to you from the very top. And at the super level, we have all those frameworks of qualifications. You have the United Nations Sustainable Goals, as you know, all, petering down to hit you right in the middle of your desk. And then you have to make professional decisions about where you're going. Even at the macro level, which is the national level, we have all the national strategies for higher education, we have apprenticeships, we have gender equity, we have child protection, we have data protection, we could go on forever. When you look at all those policies, the materials, the documents, the policies coming right down to us, and then we have to decide. Meanwhile, we also have to take in the vision and mission of our institute, and then what about your own course handbooks, and then you make a decision. So the materials are amazing. Meanwhile, at the same time, we have technology. What are you going to use? How are you going to use it? Do each system, speak to each other? One of the big problems very often is for all the systems to talk to each other in a huge institute, and do they do that? What about the budget I was talking about? Library access for students for their learning, and so forth. Your spaces, your classroom, your workshops, the labs, all those various things. And then time. Time is a resource, it's a material. So when does your semester begin? Is it worth it at that particular time? When are you having breaks? When, how many hours are you given? And so forth. And all those placements that you have to put into those, into your semesters as well. So not only the academic time, but also the placement times. And does the material flow integrate the semiotic flow? So thinking about the ideology you have and all the language there, is there time for that? Is there resources for that to help you as you move forward? And then we have pedagogy, okay? So pedagogy is, as you know, how I teach, how the students learn, and how I assess. So those three big things now in a curriculum that you have to look at. And I'm using here Van den Acker's Spider's Web. A bit dated, but it actually brings us to some of the questions we really need to ask ourselves sometimes in a little bit more simple. And at the very center of it, you see that rationale, the ideology. And there sits all your semiotics. What concepts, etc., are you actually talking about? And as well as that, they're defining, your ideology is defining your learning outcomes, towards which goals they're actually learning, and then what content you're choosing. Now look at the materials and resources. They're there. With what are they learning? The location of where they're learning, the time they've been given to learn. But as well as those semiotics and material flows, we also now have this, the other flow, which is going to be the social flow. And I point up to where, the pedagogical idea there of what learning activities, what theory of learning have you decided in your particular courses to actually, to engage in. So is it behaviorist? Is it a critical realist? Is it social constructivist? How are they learning? Because how they are learning and how that actually, your decision on that will have huge implications then for things like location, the materials you're using, the time you need, and so forth. Also, how is the educator facilitating their learning? So how are you, is it just, once again, going back to curriculum had to be delivered, and we had transmission, where, Freire talks about the banking of education. Are we back to that? Or are the students agentic human beings involved in their own actual learning? Are they active learners? And I'm talking about minds-on learners, where they really, really are engaged in that problem solving, thinking through things, and actually dialoguing about where it is that they're going. And then, of course, we have assessment. How are we assessing? As I spoke about earlier on, assessment has become a huge challenge now to us all with the rise of AI. And what kind, if they're learning this way, and I am trying to facilitate their learning, does summative assessment do it? Is that it? Or is there now much more, continuous assessment, formative assessment, much more feedback offered to us as well? So when we look at the spider's web, although it's a metaphor, it brings together those three things that I'm asking you to do. First of all, it tells us about where you're at the moment in your design of curriculum, where the gaps might be, and now with N-TUTOR, where you might want to go. So when we look at it, we're looking now at the where is your where is your ideology and your semiotics? What materials do you now need to make sure that it's a diverse, inclusive, equity curriculum? And then how will that pedagogy work out? Because as I was saying to you, there's challenges even in, if you pull the string of learning activities, even the location and time can be pulled as well, and you begin to see the effects of those. The one thing that I think about this pedagogy is the importance of the social flow in it. And let's have a look at that. Before that, just some of the just before we get into the social flow, these are all the big themes coming through now, curriculum. When you think about the curriculum change we're asking, we're talking about that all voices in your modules or your classroom will be heard. That it must be relevant and authentic. That even our assessment should be authentic. It should be lining up with real life for those students and giving them that experience. The equity, diversity, inclusion, the universal design for learning. Do we all understand what that means? Do we understand we're asking the students to be engaged, that we're asking us to rethink our representation, our action, and our expression of it? Is there freedom and flexibility in what we're doing? Is there justice? And I suppose the big thing really I would ask for will be that the students don't only just get a qualification, but that they are, I suppose, encouraged to become who they should be. I suppose, as Biesta would say, something new coming into the world is what he would suggest that our curriculum must have as well. The social flow then, when you look at it, all our values and beliefs have to be put out on the desk as we get together in collaborative practice of a curriculum. What do you actually value and what is it that you believe? That's your starting point. Get those semiotics out there. Talk about what it is that you believe. Do you believe in these themes that we're talking about here? And, sense make them. Make meaning of these themes for yourself in each department. And then, Watson says if you don't do that, well then you're starting off and, people are going to do their own thing. Because really what we need to do is have a common sense of what it is we're about and then in collaboration move forward. And that takes huge skill of communication. So whoever the leaders are of your departments, of your programs, they have a huge skill to move forward in those kind of, I suppose, negotiating and navigating the communication and social interventions that are going to have to go forward. Because the social flow is perhaps the relational, what is it that you're thinking? How can we make meaning together? And how can we bring these themes now into our curriculum? So what I'm kind of finishing with today is, every curriculum has to have an ideology. What's yours? What framework are you working from? And what pedagogy? Do they align? Is there cohesion within these three? And in order to get that, you've got to think about the flow. Your semiotic flows, your material flow, and your social flow. They work simultaneously, together in each of these things as you move forward. And really, we're facing change. It really is like a precipice change, where we're kind of jumping off into the really unknown. We talked for ages about the jobs that we don't know about. Well, we don't even talk about that anymore because we just know we don't know about it. But really what we're saying is, let's disrupt our thinking. Let's disrupt the ways, the ways we're reimagining maybe, and really think about how are you, each of us, going to self-organise our curriculum in order to accommodate the N-TUTOR themes that are vital and relevant for the 21st century. Thank you very much.
So, thank you very much. Well, certainly a lot of food for thought there, and I'm so glad that you were able to come down and give us a talk. I am now going to be joined by two of my curriculum framework colleagues, Dr. Niamh Power and Dr. Violetta Morari. So if you want to join us up here. So we did ask, as I said, we had the Slido there. So we have the question here that people online took there, and as I said, you can join in yourself if you're here. What do you see as the primary obstacle to implementing curriculum changes in higher education institutions? So we had 37% cultural resistance to change, 32% time constraint, 16% lack of expertise or training, followed then by resource constraints, 5% faculty resistance, 5% and student engagement and feedback. The cultural resistance to change and time constraints, does anybody want to, what do you think of those two factors there? The cultural resistance to change and time constraints? Or anyone think, is anything there which, Niamh, is anything which jumps off the...
Just in relation to the first one, the cultural resistance to change, sometimes I don't necessarily think it's resistance, but sometimes there's a fear that the question is so large. My area is sustainability, for example, and sometimes people think, oh my God, like, where do I even start? And it's that resistance in that it seems so hard, it seems so big, the challenge seems so overwhelming that where to start can be a big change. And that often if you just start, you'll realise that the issue may not be as big as you once thought. Working with a colleague there on Friday, and I was chatting to him, he said the best thing I can say to someone is, just start, just start. Because the hardest thing, we all do is, start something new. So sometimes when we talk about cultural resistance, it may not be full resistance, or I don't want to change, but maybe people just don't know where to start.
Yep, thank you. Violetta, anything there which sort of strike you?
Same. My area is academic integrity, so we all know there's huge changes in the area, and everybody is struggling with what needs to be done. And we know change is difficult. You always think, well, if I did that 20 years ago or 40 years ago, and this is the way it was done, and my parents were taught this way, and maybe that's okay. And it's just the change is difficult. And I think I completely agree with you. I think it's the starting. It's the one bite at a time. It needs to happen. We're all busy, but we know that it needs to come in, and I think we do. One step at a time.
Audrey, anything there?
Yeah, I think the leadership of change will be huge, really important. People are fearful of change. We're all comfortable very often with what we have been doing, and often as well angry because have we not been doing it right? You know, we've put all that energy for years and years into what we've been doing, and now you're saying maybe it's not maybe right. So I think how we are led in that change, and I think the building of capacity as well, bit by bit by bit, giving people the opportunity to learn, you know, because you can't transform unless you actually are given that opportunity to go bit by bit with, you know, and I think patience is huge. You know, people need to be really patient. It's going to take time, a long time. I think about junior cycle and the resistance to change, and we're now 10 years later, and we're still, you know, only beginning to get there, and now we have a leaving cert coming on, and more change, you know, and it's bit by bit, and you can see the change now beginning to happen, but it's not going to happen immediately, but leadership, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's certainly. But you talk about things taking time, but obviously at the risk of stating the obvious, the pandemic sort of ushered in things so quickly. I mean, do you think, I suppose one thing, now that things are settled down, do you think things have genuinely, it's an appetite for change, or is there, do you think there's a bit of settling in and settling back after the now that we've got over the pandemic, and there's a sort of sense of...
Yeah, I think it's very important. I think the pandemic was a great chance to reimagine. I have to say that, I hate to say that, but it was a great chance. I mean, digital change particularly was amazing. The fact that we can be here today and online is one of those, that we can talk to colleagues across the world and learn from those colleagues across the world. But I would say as a complexivist, I always think about change as you get to a point where you're disrupted, it comes to the edge of chaos, and then you have to organize yourself. But we don't want to step back again. We don't want to go backwards. And sometimes you have to actually power forwards a little bit, you know, push things. Otherwise, the snowball begins to get momentum backwards. So we need to get that momentum forwards constantly. And that's why I feel leadership of it and ownership, taking ownership of, you know, like we can do something here, we can change things, will be really, really important. So yes, I think people are beginning, somebody said to me the other day, will you ever stop reimagining? You know, because every time you start reimagining, there's more work, you know, and which is true, there's always more work. But I think it would be really, really important that while we take stock, there must be move forward. We must move forward and self-organize into the future. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Violetta, do you think we've settled, or do you think there's, have we settled back in after the pandemic, or do you think there's a genuine appetite for real change?
I don't know if we've settled, but I agree with you. I think we have seen huge changes. Some of those changes are for the good. Some of them are not for the good. I think we need to take a step back and think of how are the changes implemented. We need to take the good out of the changes that we made, and we need to think of what maybe isn't so good that we need to work on. Have we settled? I don't think so, but I think it is an eye-opener with the way we teach, with the way we assess, and we need to continue to put thought, particularly in the academic integrity area. How do we assess? Are our assessments valid? Are our assessments reliable? Are they secure? How do we teach? How do we make sure we meet our learning outcome and so on? So I do think it's a work in progress, very much so. I don't think it's settled yet, Tom.
No. Niamh?
It's a very tricky one. I think initially when COVID came, there was a huge move to go online, and people, I think, embraced it with gusto. And then we started to notice that, go back to your pillar, one of the social pillars, we realised that all online had its downsides, it had disadvantages. I mean, I think most people would remember speaking into the black hole of a computer screen and not quite sure what the students were engaging with the other side. I think it kickstarted the digital transformation in the higher education sector, but it also gave us a very clear insight on what the potential pitfalls were. But now that we've moved into the post-pandemic era, we now have more time to reflect on how we can actually deal with those pitfalls. how we can include digital transformation in a way that we engage the students in a little bit more, I suppose, real world context. Because COVID wasn't, you know, I suppose it was the real world for a very short space of time, but we've moved back to a post-COVID era. And I suppose we have moved on, but we also have to take the learnings from that experience with us. We have to reflect on what worked well. We also have to reflect on where we can improve. But I think it's only the start. I think really that's what it is. COVID wasn't the end, or our lecturing experience during COVID, that wasn't the end. That was only the start of the digital transformation, in my opinion.
Yep. No,
It's a work in progress, isn't it?
It's a work in progress, yeah.
Yep. And speaking of digital progress, we've another poll question. And if someone in the audience here wants to, well, after we discuss this, just Jeremiah will give you the mic. And we're also inviting people, just apart from the predetermined polls, you can also have open questions. But just speaking here about what you've just finished on there, have you integrated more digital or online resources into the curriculum post-pandemic? We had 29% saying yes, somewhat more, 24% yes, significantly more, 24% about the same as before, not applicable 19%, and interestingly 5% less than before. Surprised? I'm a little bit surprised. I would have thought at least somewhat more would have been higher. Violetta?
Well, look, I teach mathematics, so I have more than I had before. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. I think for me, I have to judge the in-class. I think what I have for myself personally, I've done a lot of videos, as we all have. We've all put in notes and videos and really looked at our inner, I don't know, acting and speaking and so on. So all the videos from the pandemic and post-pandemic went online, and students loved them. And they loved them because I suppose they can stop it and they can say, look, why would she just be quiet now? And I'm going to pause her and I'm going to take that down and I'm going to go back again. And it's very important in maths because maths can be very quick. So they are very, very good resources, and I got a lot of emails saying how brilliant they are. And of course, because students talk. When we went back post-pandemic, I found that I got constantly asked to put the videos up again to make them available to my students. So then what I found is that if the videos are available, you know, that tends to be, oh, sure, like, you know, maybe I won't go to class because I have videos. So there is a balance as to how much and when should they be released. And I really don't know, because I do find that we're all human. It's not just the students. Grown-ups do the same thing. If you think that the recording is there, sure, I'm going to watch it. Do you get to watch it? Maybe not so much. You know, I'm going to watch this conference if it's in person, if it's different to online, and there is a balance. So, yes, I have more resources. I think we all do, overall, statistically. But I think, again, there is a balance.
Yeah. Niamh?
Yeah, if I was asking that question, I think I'd put myself in the yes, somewhat more category. And the reason the reason I would put myself in there is that I am including more digital resources. I now looked to see what kind of resources are freely available. There might be a really good video, for example, that NASA might do on climate change that can speak to the students in a way that if I say the same thing, it may not grab the students' attention. However, from COVID, I also realise that social interaction is vitally important, that student engagement is vitally important. I had a student who spoke to me the other day about watching a LinkedIn Learning video, and his thing, oh yeah, I'll just put it up to 1.6 speed, you know. And he said, I watched all my classes at 1.6 speed. Yeah, fair dues to him is what I would think. But that social engagement, I think, is vitally important. How do we engage our students? If I think back to my own student experience, some of the stuff the learning that stayed and remained and stuck in my head, it wasn't necessarily when I was sitting inside in the classroom. It was that, let's go out on a site visit, let's go and see this road being built, let's go and see this wastewater treatment plant under how it's actually operating. So that student engagement, I think, is very important, and I'd like to think I've moved, yes, more digitally, but I've also looked at the more social side of it, and that student engagement element of it as well. And I think both elements are vitally important. I think we do need more digital, but we also need that engagement piece as well.
And Audrey?
Yeah, I would totally agree. In order to do that, I suppose I would have, I suppose, introduced much more collaborative assessment, much more team assessment, and also then using different digital means. So they have to do either, having that flexibility and choice for them. That as a team, they have to choose whether they were going to make a video, podcast, whether they're going to have it on Instagram, or whatever way they're going to actually produce their assessment, rather than a pen and paper assessment now, which kind of gets over the AI problem, or you can bring it in or bring it out, whatever way you want. But definitely more team. And then integrating more digital with that. And one thing I really think is fantastic from the digital online resources is they're being able to do peer feedback. That they can actually, you can use systems for them to give peer feedback, and that can be integrated. So I think assessment has changed significantly, but definitely the social flow will be really important for students, and integrating much more group work, teamwork, collaborative practice, yeah.
And even what you're mentioning there about the peer feedback, I mean, that's vitally important as well from both sets of students, because you're getting feedback, say, from a student, but actually the student who's assessing you is also getting that critical thinking competencies as well. And I think that's vitally important, that the peer-to-peer, both students actually gain from that experience. You know, you're getting your peer feedback, but you're also gaining competency skills by looking at something and critiquing it. You know, so it's a win-win situation when we look at that.
Yeah. No, I think the digital aspects, certainly for collaborative and sharing work. I mean, let's be honest. You talk about the opportunity for the social aspects, but I mean, if you look at the current housing issue, we have students who can't afford, or they can't even find. So they're finishing at 5 o'clock and doing mega commuting. So at least they can sort of, through Zoom or Teams or through Google Docs, because we often give people a sort of, here, we're going to do a group work, but how do we give them the tools to actually work together? How do they actually collaborate? It's all very well writing in the curriculum. People will do a group project, but what are the processes? Because if we're not careful, all we do is we end up assessing the product and not the process. So I suppose the digital does at least enable us some way of doing that. I don't know if there's anybody here. We can take some questions here. We have a hand up down the back there. So, Anya, you're very welcome.
Hi, Tom, and well done, Audrey. It's a fascinating presentation. I'm a graduate of Mary I actually from many moons ago, so it's great seeing the kind of curriculum theory coming back again so many years later. So I really enjoy that. I suppose my observation would be that, yes, certainly digital in terms of supporting learning, supporting teaching and so on is very important. I think Violetta's observations and what happened when she tried to marry everything and, needing to that balance of them coming in on site as well is important. I think that there's possibly an opportunity as part of the student empowerment piece of N-TUTOR to actually, the onus isn't always on us to deliver the kind of, there is obviously an onus on us to deliver that kind of student-centric piece to engage with our students, but I think there is also an onus on us to challenge and to bring our students with us in terms of empowering them to be agents in their learning. And, the site visit is fantastic and all that, but I suppose, again, coming from a maths background myself, Audrey, personally, it's something that won't be possible in all subjects. And unfortunately, sometimes you just got to get down and learn it. And that means you've got to go to the lecture. And then if you're finding the example about Laplace transforms a little bit difficult, you go back and look at the video as well for that additional piece. In the same way, a music graduate or a student will have to put in the hours of slog and practice so many hours a week. So I suppose there is a piece for us, I think, in joining all those dots together in terms of that student empowerment piece to actually take it to the kind of 360 across the university, and I suppose work with our students' union as well to kind of bring that together so that our students are really agents, and I think that's going to serve them when they go out to the world of work and to society post-graduation. Thanks.
Yeah. I would absolutely agree with you. I think the skills we're offering students today, the managing themselves, being organised, being able to organise themselves. But I suppose getting across, it's hard work. Higher education is hard work, and you do have to, and there has to be input. as well as output, you know, but input from them as well. And I suppose that self-regulation of their own learning has been hit hard by COVID. And I think all of us would agree there's kind of expectation of comings and goings, and you know, I think there has to be a recommitment to the reality of hard work, that nothing is got without that hard work. And as you say, there's so many different, you know, disciplines here, and there's none that will be gained from anybody without that hard work. But the learning of those skills, and we can see, I think the lack of organisation sometimes, the lack of managing time. But as you say, a lot of commuting now. And the digital, I was saying to somebody, but can't you listen to your plays? Can't you listen, instead of listening to music, can't you listen to your articles being read to you now, you know, on the bus? And there's so many possibilities now. Somebody was, you know, going up and down to Monaghan, and they were saying, but that's 2 hours up and 2 hours back. I said, there's 4 hours of listening to articles that, you know, that you could listen to, or your plays or whatever. So there are possibilities as well, but I think students, it is that dialogue between students and teachers, and you know, now in the classroom, and taking hold of that relational piece is really. So when we look at that sustainable, what's sustainable? It's the relationships is going to sustain the transformation, I think, to make them more agentic human beings in the future.
Excellent. I'm kind of watching the time. Well, Jeremiah is watching the time for me. So there's a couple of questions, but I won't ask everybody. If there's a top question there, Niamh, if you don't mind, I'll just read it out for people. How should change expectations post-pandemic around the way in which teaching and learning is organised and delivered be accounted for in our approaches to curriculum design and development?
Well, that's a big question.
It's a big
isn't it?
question, yeah.
Thanks, Gerald. I think when we talk about teaching and learning and how it's organised and delivered, my first thing would be to reach out to what resources are existing within your university. Every university across the country have excellent teaching and learning units. They have excellent technologically enhanced learning departments. And I think reaching out and engaging with them is vitally important. We can't expect a university to do everything for us. I think us as staff and our students, the same way Anya was mentioning there, how students have to take ownership and they have to kind of put in the slog. I think there is, you know, a requirement that lecturing staff need to kind of reach out. And actually, when you reach out, what you find is a lot of the stuff that we're doing is actually what we're supposed to be doing. And sometimes reaching out and engaging with these different offices and departments, we find out it's actually can be very reassuring. You can find out what I'm doing, you know, it's actually okay. Maybe I just need to tweak here. Maybe I need to have a different emphasis. And I think that that's what we need to do. We need to start reaching out to our existing resources.
Okay, thanks. I'm very much mindful. So I'm going to pose this last question actually to Violetta and then to you, Audrey, because I think that it chimes very much with what you were talking about. How important is the design of physical spaces? How did it go hand in hand with curriculum design? Because
Well, I think physical spaces are important. I think we understand now that a curriculum design and the learning outcomes, they need to be a lot of things, but one of the main things they need to be inclusive. So we need to make sure that everybody can achieve the learning outcomes. And I think the role of the teaching and learning, we are very fortunate, particularly in MTU, in all the campuses, to have excellent support in teaching and learning. We all know that students and people in general, I mean students are people, we fear things that we don't do. So of course, if you have a terminal exam once a year and you've never done one, you're going to be freaking out. If you have to do a presentation and you're not used to doing presentations, you're going to be very nervous. So the teaching and learning centers, they help, they help build in the oral presentations, small if you do them often, if you do them every week, if you do them every fortnight, you're going to get better. You're not going to fear them. If you do a writing examination, a writing test, then you're not going to be thinking, I'm going to have this big thing at the end of the year and I'm going to just be so nervous. It's only the practice, and I think to that end, the teaching and learning centres play a huge role in this.
okay, so and the design of physical spaces there. We're getting a wind up here, so
Yeah, we're getting a wind up. I think just instead of being curriculum deliverers, let's be curriculum makers. And that will be, I think, a slightly different kind of take on it, taking our professional, I suppose, decision making to curriculum. Sorry now, Tom?
Not at all.
You
That's
want it?
absolutely perfect. So I'm just sort of winding it up. We have done encompassed an awful lot of material, and I just really want to thank you, Audrey. I think you've given us a lot of food for thought. And I said I loved it. I was trying to take notes and photographs, but I loved when your slides there when you talked about ideology linking to framework material and ultimately onto the pedagogy, because it's all very well having we have these mission statements and values, but what does that look like in reality? And as I said, like those large theatres which universities were often proud of, look at this, we can hold 300 people, but you know, there's no point in talking about we want to do group work and engagement and activities and stuff, and then don't have the physical spaces or the resources for it there like that. So as I said, and the big thing about, I suppose, that student engagement, you talked here about humanity and sustainability and all of those things, and I don't think they're not just semiotics anymore, they're the reality, because if we don't get behind it, we're in real trouble. We deliberately, as I said, this event, as I said, I'm on the curriculum development team, and we have 6 teams, but this idea was just to try and think about how we can sort of think about affecting change across the curriculum rather than focusing on just one team. So I think hopefully we've done that. So as I say, a huge thank you to Audrey, a huge thank you to the team there, because I don't think people appreciate when you're doing these hybrid events, if they look really slick and professional, it's because they have really got on top of things, practiced and rehearsed time and time again. So I mean, I tell you how good they are. They can even make me look good, which is everything. But no, I really do. I think N-TUTOR Week, as I said, there's some great events right across the week. I think it's a great way of sort of the higher education, technical, the universities sort of showcasing our work. And I have to say, for someone who comes from a traditional university, you have really captured what N-TUTOR is trying to achieve. So I think if that's, we'll wrap her up. I just want to thank everybody here in our audience and everybody here online. Audrey, Violetta and Niamh, thank you very much, everybody.